Well, welcome back to another episode of the Traditions for the Future podcast. I'm your host, Junius Brutus. Well, this week, on Tuesday's article, I wrote How to Satisfy Your Mind. And it's something I've thought about recently, where I will come home and mindlessly consume content. Nothing that's stimulating, nothing that's too thought-provoking, or nothing that's too hard to consume. Just something easy to get in that I don't have to think about. And it's to help me unwind, de-stress, relax for the rest of the evening after a long day. But I never seem satisfied. I never seem satisfied with the result of being on my phone for an hour and just scrolling. So it's something I know that other people deal with. I mean, the feeling is listlessness. And so what I wanted to talk about is how do I, personally, from my experience, how I have been able to overcome that feeling where I can utilize my mind and de-stress without feeling guilty afterwards. So here's how I satisfy my mind. First, I start off with the assumption that the mind needs to be fed. That's what I'm feeling in that moment. And how is the mind fed? Well, like the body, the mind needs food. The natural body needs meat, vegetables, fruits, grains, things like that. But the mind only has one food source. Charlotte Mason, in her book Philosophy of Education, says that the mind only runs off of one food source: ideas. In Tuesday's article, I said, like the body, when the mind is not fed with good food, it begins to decay. When your body's not properly fed, your mind is affected. You become irritable and grouchy. Your body was made to consume food. The same is true for your mind. Without the consumption of ideas, your mind suffers. So there's only one food source that I can have that will satisfy me. It's ideas. Not easy content, not cheap content, not anything that will take away the time, but ideas. That's the first assumption. The second thing on how I satisfy my mind, how I feed my mind, is where I get ideas. And I mainly get ideas from books. I like to read a lot. And so there isn't a greater food source than books, because they contain the wisdom of thousands of years of human history, where all these ideas have been contained and preserved through books, where you can read someone's idea from 3,000 years ago, today, where that is not consumed, but packaged for you for today. So books are the best food source, in my opinion. Some people like to listen to podcasts. I'm not too much of a fan of podcasts, ironically enough. I like to read, where I don't like to hear someone's opinion about something or their take on something. I want to read the actual person. I think C.S. Lewis said one time, it's easier for people to read Plato than to read someone talking about Plato, where that person is harder to understand than Plato himself. And I find that to be the case. So I would rather read from the direct source than from an indirect source, where that author is pouring into my mind personally, rather than the author poured into someone else's mind and then that person is pouring into my mind. That's how I get my books. That's how I get my ideas, is through books. Thirdly, what I do is, how do I read? Well, I personally have an unorthodox way of reading, where I don't read one book at a time. I read multiple. And how I read multiple is not by sitting down every day and reading 20 or 30 pages out of each book. I have found personally how I like to manage things, how I can manage things, is about 5 books in my stack at any given time is about the max that I can handle. So I take 5 books, and every day I like to take each book and read just 4 pages a day from each of those books. And the reason being is because I want to, over the course of a year, read a lot of books, but sometimes I don't have enough time to sit down and plow through each book, each 5 books at a time. And so I recommend you kind of plod through the books rather than try and, sprint through the books, where I've found that I tend to read more in a year plodding than I do through sprinting. So that's how I read my books. And then number 4, the fourth way, now my mind is satisfied, or the fourth step, I should probably call it, is what types of books do I read? Well, I like to read a little varied, not too much in one genre, not too much in one category, where, I like to write nonfiction, but I can't read just nonfiction. My mind tends to suffer when I only read nonfiction. And so I like to mix in a little bit of fiction in what I'm reading. Currently, I have, I think, 2 books of fiction out of my 5. And then the other 3 are nonfiction. And so I like to have quite a big chunk of what I read is fiction. That's how my mind works. Where for you, if you are looking to feed your mind, you're going to have to figure it out as you go along, where you're going to have to experiment with, do I read only nonfiction, or do I read or do I only read fiction? Do I read mostly fiction or mostly nonfiction? That's something that you will have to determine. It's like experimenting with food. If we go back to this view of the mind is similar to the body, you experiment with food. What has the best results? Which food do you do best with? Some people do well with grains, some people do not. Some people do really well with vegetables, some people do not. And so you have to experiment with your own mind what you best run on. How are the ideas packaged? How do you consume them? In what ways are they consumed? Things like that. That's for your own determination. And fifthly, what do I do with the ideas, or what are some other ways that I can feed my mind? Well, I am a big proponent of living out ideas, where in my mind, if I can think something, I believe I should be able to do it. Where personally, I am not satisfied with just thinking of an idea and doing nothing about it. I like to live out what I'm thinking about, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much I fail. If my mind is satisfied with an idea, I have to do something with it. And so with, if you're reading Aristotle on virtue, I'm going to want to live that out. I'm going to want to live out that virtue. If it's with education, with learning a language, I'm going to want to learn that language. I'm going to want to learn Latin. Right now, I've just picked up French again, and I haven't picked up French in years. And, you know, I don't want to think about learning a language. I want to learn the language. I want to do the thing I'm thinking about. That's living it out. And so, for me, I am not satisfied with sitting back and consuming ideas and being an intellectual only. I hate intellectualism because of that, because they don't do anything with it other than talk about ideas and do nothing about it. That's what I'm here for, is to, resonate with people who not only like these ideas, but want to live them out. That's what Traditions for the Future is for. It's for you to live ideas out. Another way in which I feed my mind and is through art, actually through painting and through music. Recently, my mind has been more fatigued, and my soul has been more run down because I haven't been taking in good and beautiful things. And so that needed to change. So a couple weeks ago, I got some oil paints, and I've been painting again. And I haven't messed with oil paints in about 6 years. And it's been good for me. And so using a creative outlet, doing something beautiful and good, is another way in which my mind is fed. Another way is being out in nature, going on walks, seeing the natural world for what it is, seeing trees and bushes and flowers and birds. That satisfies me. That's something I enjoy, that I need. It's not something I can go without. It's something I need. I need to see those things. I need to be in those things. And that's another way. And then finally, something I've been doing recently is focusing more on the gym, where I used to be really into the gym, going 6 days a week, all of the intense things you can think of. But more recently, I've been slacking off, and I haven't been going as frequently. I haven't been going as intensely, and I haven't loved it as much. And so training my mind to enjoy beautiful things, being out in nature, and training my own body and being disciplined has been very good for me to feed my mind. And so I hope with those 5 things or steps or ways, those things for you to consider will be helpful for you to feed your own mind. If you're interested in more things to help feed your mind, then head over to my Substack, where I have free articles, podcasts, and resources and guides for you to use. It is juniusbrutus.substack.com.